Alright, so we have now come to the second part of my little Bleach series, where we take a look back at the 2004 Bleach anime, arc by arc. Today we're going to be talking about the second arc in Bleach, which is known as the Soul Society, the Sneak Entry arc. This arc aired in Japan between March and July 2005. It comprises episodes 21 through 41, and chronicles Ichigo and the gang's entry into the Soul Society and their mission to locate Rukia. So without any further ado, let's just jump into this. First up, I'll just quickly recap the end of the first arc in case you don't remember. Rukia is being hunted by her brother Byakuya and Renji from the Soul Society for her crimes of giving her powers to a human and living with them in the human world. Ichigo is defeated and loses his Shinigami power, while Rukia is taken back to the Soul Society to be put on death row. Ichigo then trains with Kisuke to regain his Shinigami power before him and the gang set off to the Soul Society to rescue Rukia. So this arc starts by them barely being able to escape a monster and enter the Soul Society. Well, almost. They are stopped at the gates just before they can enter by the giant Jidanbo Ikansaka. He is the guardian of the gate who they have to defeat in order to get access to the inner city of the Soul Society, something which Ichigo does with relative ease, letting us know that he has once again powered up. Having been inflicted his first defeat in over 300 years, Jidanbo opens the gate for them so that they can enter. If only it was that easy. On the other side of the gate stands a menacing man, the suspicious-looking Shinigami captain known as Gen Ichimaru, who easily blows them away, once again closing the gate. Needing to find another way in, Yoruichi takes them to the home of an old friend, the leader of the Shiba clan, Kukaku Shiba. She owns a giant cannon, which is usually used for fireworks, but Ichigo and the gang are gonna use it to sneak into the Soul Society. Because nothing is as subtle and sneaky as a loud-ass cannon. But they also need to take Ganju Shiba with them. He's the brother of Kukaku, and he hates Shinigami due to an incident where a Shinigami killed his older brother, Kaien Shiba. But anyways, the cannon entry is a success. Kinda. Not only do Ichigo and Ganju, Orihime and Ishida, Yoruichi, as well as Chad all get split up, but these masters of stealth also manage to alert the entirety of the Shinigami military command, who immediately send out the captains of the different Shinigami squads to capture these intruders. So while our heroes are all trying to find each other, as well as a route to where Rukia is being held captive, they are also having to fight off lower officer Shinigami, who are trying to capture them. Most of which are just fodder and not that interesting. The three fights that are interesting, however, are Ichigo's fight with our good friend, Lieutenant Renji Abarai, who has come out to play. Chad's fight against the laid-back Shinigami captain Shunsui Kyoraku, as well as Ichigo's fight with the bloodthirsty Shinigami captain Kenpachi Zaraki. But while all of this is going on, something else happens that shocks the entire Soul Society to its core. Another Shinigami captain, Sousuke Aizen, is discovered to have been murdered and displayed for all the Shinigami captains to see. This sends the Soul Society into full wartime defense, and an internal conflict arises among the Shinigami, several of which suspect that other Shinigami captains are responsible for the murder of Aizen. And the prime suspect is the very same Gen Ichimaru who stopped our heroes from entering the Soul Society. So yeah, stuff definitely happened in this arc. A lot of it was just our heroes trying to find a way into the Soul Society, and another part was kinda just fodder fights against lower ranked Shinigami. But apart from that, we also have the conflict of Ganju and Kukaku Shiba, who both don't like Shinigami due to their older brother being killed by one. That does set up a bit of a conflict between Ganju and the others, plus a conflict between him and Rukia, who was the Shinigami who killed his brother. But I don't think it's worth getting into too much here, because it largely doesn't matter that much, and there is more to it that gets revealed in the next arc. But there are still 4 events that are definitely the highlight of this arc. I mentioned them earlier. Those are Ichigo's fight against Renji, Ichigo's fight against Kenpachi, Chad's fight against Shunsui, and the murder of Aizen. So those are the events I want to get more into now. First I want to talk about Ichigo's fight versus Renji. So Ichigo, Ganju, and their newly picked up medic Hanataro are on their way to the Sensai-Q, or the Repentance Palace, which is the place where Rukia is being held. But as they approach this prison, they see a figure appearing in the fog. It's someone we know quite well already, Shinigami Lieutenant Renji Abarai. So we're already getting the rematch between Ichigo and Renji that got interrupted by Byakuya. But this time, things are a little different. While Ichigo and Renji were roughly equals in the human world, there is a reason for that we of course only get to learn about now. You see, Shinigami are much weaker in the human world, so the Renji he is fighting now is fighting at full power. Cue a bit of shit talking back and forth while we're basically just learning about the 11th lieutenants and the 13 captains that all stand in Ichigo's way, as well as Renji asking Ichigo if he's willing to risk his life, going through all of them to get to Rukia, something which Ichigo confidently proclaims that he will. But first he has to beat Renji, and that is proving to not be so easy. The reason for this is that Ichigo is lacking something. No, I'm not talking about a different attacking move than jump and slash. Though he really should be looking into learning some new attacks as well. No. What Ichigo really lacks is the resolution to kill, something that Urahara has been trying to teach him. But it is here, on the brink of exhaustion, fighting against Renji, that Ichigo is finally really able to hit his opponent with resolve. And as Ichigo's resolve grows stronger, he's able to control his spiritual powers a lot better. This results in him being able to shatter Renji's Sabimaru and inflicting a devastating loss to Renji, who then proceeds to let us know that he also wishes he was strong enough to help Rukia. That is the gist of what happens during this fight. There's obviously more to it, as well as some stuff that I didn't cover, but in essence, it's all about testing Ichigo's resolve. It was a very needed addition to this arc, because it had been kinda boring so far. But this not only taught us what a monumental task Ichigo has undertaken, but also that the Shinigami he will be fighting here are much stronger than when he fought Renji and Byakuya back in the human world. A terrifying realization, because Renji was so much stronger, and he's only a lieutenant. Captains are even stronger than this, and Ichigo was already no match for Byakuya back then. But Ichigo is not fazed by this. He only wants to save Rukia, who's made a huge impact on his life, and he will defeat anyone who decides to get in his way to prevent him from doing just that. Is this confidence or stupidity speaking? Probably both. Definitely both. But at least his resolve is clear. This fight also starts to show us that not all the Shinigami are in agreement with the harsh punishment that Rukia has been given. And like in the case of Renji, he doesn't believe Rukia's crimes warrant such a harsh penalty. We're basically being told that there is more brewing under the surface, something that will come more to light in the next arc. Renji actually wants to help her as well, but it's a lack of belief in himself and his strength, and a fear that he won't be able to help her just like in the past that prevents him from doing anything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's move on to the next big event in this arc. So the next fight I want to highlight is Chad's fight against the 8th Division Captain, Shunsui Kyoraku. This fight is filled with red flags from start to finish. Firstly, because Shunsui really seems like a very easygoing type of character, and doesn't exactly come across as particularly dangerous. If anything, he's just straight up lazy. Other red flags they put up is Ichigo talking about how he's never seen Chad lose a fight before. Clearly the show is doing everything it can to set Chad up for failure, and that is exactly what happens. Not only does Shunsui defeat Chad, he completely destroys him. Chad can't even touch him. Even armed with his new attack, Shunsui either easily avoids being hit at all, or just simply deflects it as if it was the easiest thing in the world to him. The reason for this is because the show wants to show us just how big of a difference there is in power between someone who just learned to use spiritual powers and a Shinigami Division's captain. Good old shonen power creep. Although it's still early in the series, so it's not exactly out of control yet. These Shinigami captains being way stronger than our main group of characters at this moment in time still makes sense. However, just affirming the gap in strength between characters is not the only reason why this fight is important. This fight also serves another purpose as well, and that is to ascertain Chad's motive behind wanting to save Rukia. I mean, it's not like he needed to be here or risk his life for her. Rukia is not nearly as important to him as she is to Ichigo, so then why is he willing to risk his life for someone he's only known for a little bit? Simply put, because Ichigo wants to save her. A bit of a shonen trope of an answer from Chad, but there is at least some substance to it. You see, Chad was a troublesome kid in the past. However, it was his grandfather, whom he lived with in Mexico, that taught him not to use his fists for himself. He should only use them to protect others. And to remind himself of that, Chad still carries around a coin that his grandfather gave to him. This is the reason why Chad won't fight back when people attack him. However, as we see in a flashback, some thugs who really didn't like him decided to take the opportunity to knock Chad out with a rock, tie him up with chains under a bridge, and threaten to destroy his precious coin, unless Chad dies. Prepared to do just that, as he values that coin more than his own life, he's surprised when Ichigo shows up and starts fighting these thugs for him. Having fought them off and gotten Chad's coin back, they both agree that from now on, they will fight for each other and what they want to protect, rather than for themselves. So yeah, this is why Chad is willing to risk his life to save someone he's not that close with. It's not for himself, but for Ichigo. However, even with all this friendship power to back him up, Chad still ends up losing to Shunsui and ends up being captured. This fight is very interesting, albeit very telegraphed. But the most interesting part about this fight is the backstory on Chad. Seeing that he used to be a very troubled kid who would often get in fights with others, and the reason for why he ended up not wanting to hurt others was definitely a nice addition to his character. Plus, they also gave him some decent motivation for wanting to risk his life to save Rukia, considering that he doesn't really know her that well. This part of the arc really showed how strong the bond is between Ichigo and Chad, and I appreciate that. But of course, the fact that Chad was going to lose this fight was extremely obvious. They spent a lot of time mentioning that Chad never loses and all this nonsense, so you just knew it was gonna happen. But again, it makes sense to do so. We are being told that these Shinigami captains are really strong, so we also kinda have to see it in action as well. Otherwise it's gonna lose a lot of its impact when they are finally defeated. The last fight I want to touch on is Ichigo's fight versus Kenpachi. This is the big fight of this arc, and it's completely crazy, just like Kenpachi himself. You see, unlike most of the other Shinigami captains, Kenpachi is special, and not in a good way. This murder-loving Shinigami captain has never actually learned how to properly wield his Shinigami powers, unlike every other captain. He also doesn't know his weapon's true name, and cannot hear its voice, so he does not know how to use his Bankai, for example. The Bankai being the final upgraded form of a Shinigami's weapon, basically their special attack. Now, you might think that makes him weak, but you would be wrong. If anything, it shows just how ridiculously strong this man actually is. He's managed to get to his position, despite not being able to use his full power. That just means that his fighting skills and love for fighting is so good that he doesn't need any of this to prove how strong he really is. As a matter of fact, Kenpachi does several things just to make himself weaker, so that he can hopefully get a good fight. For example, he wears bells. These serve no other purpose than to alert enemies to his presence. Kind of pointless in hindsight, since his uncontrollable spiritual powers leak out everywhere and alert everyone to his presence anyways. He's also got an eye patch. No, he did not lose his eye in a fight. He simply doesn't need to use both of his eyes when he goes to fight people. So only allowing himself to see through one eye is something he does only to weaken himself. And that pretty much ties into why he doesn't even bother learning about his weapon and how to use his Bankai, or use spiritual powers. He's already too goddamn overpowered, so doing that would simply make fighting even more boring to him, as no one would be able to give him a good fight. This whole thing obviously terrifies Ichigo. This man is so damn powerful that he even allows Ichigo to get the first blow completely without any retaliation. And while Ichigo initially refuses to strike an opponent who hasn't drawn his weapon yet, Kenpachi assures him that it's not mockery. He simply wants to enjoy the fight. And so Ichigo does as instructed and goes for the first blow of the fight. However, to his surprise, it did absolutely nothing to his opponent. As a matter of fact, it was Ichigo himself who took damage from the attack. This is a result of the difference in their spiritual powers. Basically, because Ichigo's spiritual power is weaker than Kenpachi's, when their spiritual power collides, the impact goes to the weaker one. So yeah, the spiritual power that unconsciously leaks from Kenpachi is stronger than the spiritual power that Ichigo has trained to improve. Told you guys this guy was overpowered. All in all, Kenpachi is very disappointed in Ichigo, as he was expecting him to be stronger, and that he's wasted his time running around looking for him. And so a horrified Ichigo starts running away while Kenpachi chases after him, and a completely one-sided battle occurs. It takes everything Ichigo has just to block and avoid Kenpachi's attacks. However, it turns out that he's only toying with Ichigo, and once he's grown tired of it, he proceeds to pierce his Sanpakuto through Ichigo's Sangetsu and stab him in the heart, snapping Sangetsu. But as Ichigo's laying on the ground, trying everything he can just to not bleed out, Sangetsu appears before him and takes Ichigo to his own inner world again. In there, Ichigo is forced to fight against himself without using Sangetsu, who his white self is now in control over. Ichigo not only gets to see how powerful Sangetsu can be when using its full potential, but also learns that his shortcoming has been only caring about himself and his own training, and not about Sangetsu. Yet he still didn't learn any new attacks. Declaring that he's right, Ichigo asks Sangetsu to teach him more about himself, and Sangetsu goes back into Ichigo's hands. Now back in the real world, Ichigo makes a miraculous recovery and powers up even more. Now he's actually able to fight back against Kenpachi, who responds joyously by removing his eye patch and taking on Ichigo at full power, as a proper fight breaks out. And after having seriously wounded each other, they both eventually collapse, and Kenpachi declares Ichigo the winner of the fight. Honestly, this whole fight is just amazing. It has everything you would want in terms of build-up and excitement. And while Bleach still uses a lot of the obvious shonen tropes, like sudden power-ups and power of friendship, the fight still feels very satisfying, because it's done so well. Kenpachi is an absolute monster of an opponent, and he seems to be way too strong for Ichigo. However, a bullshit shonen trope, full revival and sudden power-up later, and Ichigo is back on his feet and actually able to fight back, and it becomes a really close fight. Not a great way to go about things from a narrative point of view, but it's fun, so I'll allow it. They actually end up taking each other out, but Kenpachi gives the win to Ichigo. That can seem a little bit bullshit as well, but it sort of makes sense for Kenpachi's character. All he wants is an opponent who can fight him as his equal, and he finally got that in Ichigo. So the fact that he even managed to fight Kenpachi to a draw is enough to earn his respect. And of course, now he wants to fight him again, and have an actual winner this time. This fight for me is the big highlight of this arc. At least as far as the fights that happen are concerned. But there is one more thing that tops it, and makes the arc coming up after this one seem all the more exciting. The very last thing I want to touch on in this arc is the big surprise that I definitely wasn't expecting, and that is the murder of the captain of the 5th Division, Sousuke Aizen. So, if you're like me, you have definitely heard a lot about Bleach, even if you haven't watched it yet. Because of this, I have heard a lot about Aizen and how much people like his character. So when I was finally introduced to him, I was looking forward to seeing what this clearly very important Shinigami captain is actually like. And it's exactly because of this that I was more than just a little surprised when he got killed off. It was not something I was expecting at all. Obviously, this means that you can quite easily expect the twist that will most certainly come later, but that's something I will discuss more going over future arcs. But let's set that aside for now and actually focus on the handling of this murder, because I actually think this was very well done. We're introduced to a character named Hinamori. She herself is not really the most interesting character, but she is important in that she is the lieutenant of the 5th Division, serving under Aizen. She greatly admires Aizen, and we get to watch how he behaves through her. And it's quite easy to see why she admires him so much. Not only is he strong, but he also comes across as kind and caring, if a bit awkward. Seems like a really likable guy. And as we're watching Hinamori sit behind him while he writes a letter until Hinamori falls asleep, we're not suspecting anything. That is, until he suddenly decides to step outside. The next thing we know, Hinamori wakes up and rushes to make it to her meeting, only to be greeted by a shocking sight. The dead body of Sousuke Aizen, which has been hung up on the East Holy Wall, impaled through the chest by his own Zanpakuto. This scene actually made me audibly gasp. Because I knew about Aizen before, I definitely wasn't expecting him to just be killed off right away like that. It really took me by surprise. Not because I wasn't expecting him to pull something, but because they spent so much time building up Ichimaru as the obvious bad guy and obviously then also the prime suspect in the murder of Aizen. It made me think he was going to do something to increase the already ongoing chaos, but a murder mystery was not really something I had guessed. Still, it definitely made things feel a lot more interesting, because you can just tell that there is something wrong with this entire situation. It feels well crafted, but also amateurish enough that the culprit is already very obvious. But that makes me more interested in seeing the continuation, because I want to know if my hunch is right, or if it really is just that open and shut. We've also spent a decent amount of time this arc looking into the past of Renji and Rukia, and following Hinamori around for a bit. The latter of which is easily the most boring part of this arc, but now suddenly we have quite the twist on our hands. Because now we have a traitor among the Shinigami, which has to be dealt with. At the same time, Ichigo and his friends are coming to save Rukia. This is what sets us up for continuing on to Bleach's 3rd arc, the Soul Society Rescue Arc. Now, before I end things off, I want to give my overall thoughts on this arc of Bleach. It was not quite as exciting as I was expecting it to be. The arc starts off quite slow, and it eventually becomes evident that the rescue of Rukia is not gonna happen in this arc. However, that doesn't mean it's completely without its merits, because, like I've already mentioned, it has some clear strong points. That being Ichigo's fight versus Renji, Chad versus Shunsui, and especially Ichigo's fight versus Kenpachi. This, as well as the murder of Aizen, are what really makes this arc. Yes, looking into Renji and Rukia's past was interesting, and needed for further development of them as characters. But it's not really the most interesting thing to watch. At least not yet. Because of this, I will say that I think this arc is quite a mixed bag. Very good at its best, but quite boring for long stretches of it. However, those exciting parts have really made me interested in what is going to happen in the next arc. My favorite character from this arc is hands down Kenpachi though. That guy manages to be a blend of really cool, really silly, and just downright terrifying. Also gotta give a quick shout out to my man Shunsui. Easygoing, laid back, not super serious like a lot of the other Shinigami captains. But despite this, he's still really strong, and he knows what matters the most to him. He's definitely a character I'm looking forward to learning more about in the future as well. So yeah, I will be continuing on to Arc 3, which is the rescue arc. Hopefully Bleach will build upon the strong points of this arc, as well as give some payoff that makes it worth it to continue even further past that. So yeah, those were my thoughts on Bleach's second arc, the sneak entry arc. Not gonna lie, I was a little bit disappointed with this arc at the start, because I was hoping for something more in terms of action and in terms of progress. But realistically, nothing much has really changed from the start of this arc to the end. The only things that have changed are that they know now where Rukia is being held, and Ichigo is starting to learn a bit more about his powers. But that is it. That being said though, the fights towards the end of this arc are pretty good, and the murder of Aizen makes me super excited for Arc 3. But this wraps up the second arc of Bleach. We're now moving on to the third arc, which I've already seen by the time I'm recording this. So the third part in this series might not take so long before it's out. So hope you guys are looking forward to that. Also, if you have any opinions about this format, let me know in the comments. I'd love to get some feedback on things you like and what I could improve upon as I go through Bleach arc by arc. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to be notified when I upload again, as well as follow me on Twitter to get notified of when I upload or to just keep up with what I'm doing. I've not been super active on Twitter, so I haven't really advertised it, but I do want to try to be a bit more active on social media in general. You can also follow my Twitch if you want to watch me stream games, which I usually do on the weekends, usually around 7 to 8 PM CET. You can find links to all of these in the description. Anyways, that's enough self-promotion. Peace.